Wild West love stories. Are you going to sell me too? A cowboy's heartbreak. The first gust from the San Juan range lashed across dry well like the roar of a chained beast. Red dust spiraled up, rattling the rusted shop signs, slipping through the cracks of weather-worn doors. Down the center street rode a lone figure, reins tight, wide-brimmed hat shadowing half a sunburnt face. Caleb Rowan, 25, a young cowboy with storm-gray eyes, guided his mule steady. He had meant only to stop for salt, coffee, and a box of 45 cartridges, enough to keep him alive on Black Mesa a few more weeks. He never planned to linger. Yet the limping notes of a piano drifted from the Copper Lantern Saloon, tugging like a devil's hand. One drink, he told himself, just one to warm the bones. He tied the mule, pushed open the batwing doors, and a wall of smoke, sweat, and sour beer hit him. Inside, the floor was littered with damp sawdust. Men hunched over cards, hats pulled low. Caleb chose the far corner, back to the wall, eyes glancing into the cracked mirror behind the bar. He ordered whiskey. The first shot burned down his throat. The second dulled the wind outside. He thought he'd be gone within minutes. Then a drunken voice cut through the haze. $20, and she's yours. The saloon froze. Caleb kept his eyes on the mirror. The speaker was Harlan Pike, a ranch hand deep in debt, shirt crusted with mud, boots split at the heel, and beside him stood a young woman. She was close to Caleb's age, dark hair hanging loose, a faded blue dress clinging to a frame worn thin. Her chin was lifted with stubborn pride, yet her eyes smoldered with resentment. Harlan gripped her arm tight, shoving her forward like livestock. "She can cook, clean, mend fence," he barked. $20, cheap at that. Someone muttered near the card tables. "You selling your fiancée, Harlan?" Harlan wheeled, eyes bloodshot. "You feeding her. You paying my debts." "Didn't think so." The room fell silent, only wood creaking under boots. Caleb's throat tasted bitter iron. In the mirror, he saw another scene. Santa Fe. Years ago, the girl he'd loved handed over to a wealthy man because her family owed money. Caleb had been too poor, too helpless to stop it. That scar had never healed. His hand tightened on the glass. He set it down. He stood. His voice was low, but every word struck clear. "I'll take her." Harlan blinked. "What?" $20. I'll take her." Caleb pulled 10 silver coins, then 10 more, placing them one by one on the bar. Each clink echoed like a chambered round. Heads turned. The woman's eyes widened, confusion and alarm mingling. Harlan's grin spread, and he shoved her toward Caleb. "There you go, Lark. New man now." Caleb didn't touch her. He only stepped between her and Harlan, gaze sharp enough to cut. That was enough to make Harlan flinch. The rancher swept up the silver and slunk out the door without another glance. The saloon air hung tight as a drawn bow. No one spoke. Caleb tipped his hat once and motioned to the doors. "Come on." Outside, the wind howled colder. Caleb shrugged off his leather coat and tossed it to her. "Wear it." She hesitated, then wrapped it around herself, as if warmth was something rare. "You know how to ride a mule?" Caleb asked. "Yes," she said, voice husky but firm. "Then mount up. This one's Juniper. She's steady." They left town as the sun dragged west. The trail to Black Mesa, winding, sharp and narrow. Caleb led on foot, rope in hand. Lark rode in silence, eyes locked on the strong line of his shoulders. At a mountain spring, he offered her water, then a strip of jerky. "What's in the bundle?" he asked. "A letter I never sent," she said, clutching tighter. "And my mother's ring." Caleb nodded. He asked no more. Night fell when the cabin appeared among the aspens. A squat log shelter, smoke hole black, door barred by a rough beam. "Home," he muttered, the word strange on his tongue. He struck flint, coaxed fire, set beans and salt pork to boil. Lark lingered near the door, eyes wary, as if she might bolt. When the pot steamed, Caleb set a tin plate before her. "Eat. Not fancy, but warm." She eyed him, then lifted the spoon, hunger winning. Caleb quietly pushed half his share to her side. She stared, startled, then ate. The fire snapped. Wind clawed at the cabin walls. Caleb spread a wool blanket by the hearth. "You take the bed," he said. "I'll sleep here." "You're not going to—" She stopped, eyes sharp with suspicion. Caleb raised open palms. "I didn't buy you. I bought your freedom. No one touches you here unless you want it." Their eyes locked. A long, taut silence. The wall of distrust held, but a thin crack had opened. Outside, the moon crested the San Juan peaks, cold and watchful. Inside the small cabin, two strangers, a lonely cowboy and a woman spared from being sold, sat across the fire. Neither knew it yet, but the bargain struck that night would change them forever. The trail out of Drywell rose fast into the teeth of the San Juans. Dust gave way to stone, then to patches of snow clinging stubbornly to shaded bends. Juniper, the mule, plodded steady. Lark sat upright in the saddle, Caleb leading on foot with the rope in hand, his boots crunching over gravel. Neither spoke at first. The silence between them was as sharp as the mountain air. The town lights had long vanished behind them, swallowed by the dark. Lark kept stealing glances at the broad shoulders in front of her, the coat he'd given her wrapped tight. The thought hammered at her. He could have left me there. Why didn't he? She studied the way he walked, measured, unhurried, like a man who had nothing left to prove. At a bend where a spring trickled from rock, Caleb stopped. He handed her the canteen, then offered another strip of jerky. She took it without a word, biting slow, still clutching her cloth bundle. Caleb broke the silence. "You plan on telling me your story?" Her eyes narrowed. "Do you plan on selling me like he did?" The words hit him harder than a fist. He swallowed, jaw set. "No." "Then what do you want from me?" she pressed. Caleb exhaled, looking up at the pale moon. "Nothing. Maybe a chance to make right what I couldn't years ago." Her gaze lingered on him, uncertain. But the anger in her voice softened. "My father owed everyone. He promised me to Harlan. Thought marrying me off would square his debts. When that failed, Harlan decided to auction me instead." She spat the last word like poison. Caleb said nothing. The memory of Santa Fe burned too raw to speak. Instead, he simply nodded, and they resumed the climb. By the time they reached the cabin, the moon hung high. The squat log house huddled in a ring of aspens, chimney dark against the sky. Caleb swung the door open. Inside was sparse, a rough bed against the wall, a stone hearth, a table scarred by knives. He lit a lantern, then bent to strike flint. Flames caught, warming the chill. Lark stepped just inside, eyes darting. She hovered near the door, still gripping her bundle, body stiff as a trapped animal. Caleb busied himself with beans and salt pork, letting the smell fill the room. He slid a plate across the table. "Eat. You'll feel better." She hesitated, then lowered herself onto the bench. The food was plain, but it was hot, and hunger gnawed deeper than pride. She ate, fast at first, then slowed. Caleb pretended not to notice when she scraped the last bit with her spoon. He pushed half his portion onto her plate. She froze, glancing at him. "Go on," he said simply. Her eyes softened, just a fraction. When the meal was done, he spread a wool blanket beside the fire. "You take the bed. I'll stay here." Suspicion flared in her face. "You mean to tell me you paid $20 just to give me a bed?" Caleb looked at her steadily. "I paid $20 so no one else could own you. You're free to leave come morning if that's what you want." Something in his voice, flat, steady, stripped of deceit, stirred a crack in her armor. She lowered herself onto the bed, still clutching the bundle. Shoes on, eyes fixed on the rafters. Caleb stretched out near the fire, hat over his chest. He stared at the flames, feeling the weight of her gaze, even as she pretended to sleep. His body was tired, but sleep didn't come easy. Not with the echo of her words ringing. "Do you plan on selling me like he did?" Hours passed. The wind prowled outside, testing the shutters. Inside, the fire's glow painted the cabin in amber. At last, her voice drifted across the silence. "Why do you live up here alone?" He shifted, hat tipping back. "Because the mountains don't ask questions. The town has too many memories I'd rather not face." She was quiet a long time, then whispered, "I miss my mother, but not my father. Is that wrong?" Caleb turned his head, meeting her eyes through the dim. There's nothing wrong in missing kindness and not missing cruelty. For the first time, she didn't look away. The fire snapped between them, but the air felt different, less brittle, more alive. When her breathing finally slowed, Caleb let his shoulders ease. He pulled the blanket higher around himself, guarding the fire like a sentry. Outside, snowflakes began to fall, silent and steady, as if the mountain itself had chosen to bear witness to the fragile pact forming between two strangers inside. Spring crept onto Black Mesa like a cautious traveler. Snow shrank into rivulets, streams spoke louder each day, and the air carried the smell of wet earth. For Caleb, the season meant labor, chopping wood, mending traps, patching the roof where the storms had gnawed. For Lark, it meant the first test of whether she truly belonged up here, or would slip back down the mountain when the chance came. She woke before dawn, not waiting for Caleb to stir the fire. She carried water from the stream, her steps careful but steady, thin arms growing stronger with each trip. Caleb watched from the doorway, saying nothing, but the sight pulled something taut inside his chest. She wasn't fragile glass. She was steel being tempered. "Hold lower," he told her one morning, adjusting her grip on the axe handle. His hands brushed hers, rough against slender. "Let the weight do the work." She nodded, jaw set. The axe came down sharp, splitting the log with a crisp crack. A rare smile tugged her lips. Caleb caught it, a flash of warmth he hadn't seen in years. That night, blisters ringed her palms. He rubbed them with bare fat, binding with clean cloth. She compared her small hands to his scarred ones. "Will mine ever get tough like yours?" "In time," he said softly. "Everything on this mountain takes time." He showed her how to read the weather, how the tilt of clouds foretold snow, How the silence of birds meant something larger prowled. They crouched together over tracks in soft mud, rabbit, deer, and once the broad pad of a cougar. Female, Caleb murmured, tracing the shape. By size, probably has cubs. How can you tell it's not male? She asked. Males are heavier. Their pads spread wider. Her gaze was sharp, drinking in every word. She listened like survival itself depended on it. And perhaps it did. Evenings brought quieter lessons. Skinning rabbits, tanning hides, stitching torn seams. Sometimes their hands brushed as they worked side by side. Neither spoke of it, but both felt the spark. One evening, as smoke curled from the hearth, she asked, "Why did you really take me from that saloon?" Caleb's chest tightened. He stared into the fire. "Because I once loved a woman I couldn't save. She was sold off like cattle to pay a debt. I swore I'd never stand by again." Her eyes softened. "So I was your chance to keep that promise?" "Maybe." He risked looking at her. "But you're not just a promise. You're you." The silence that followed was heavy, yet not uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who understood pain, and in it found recognition. Summer burned the mesa golden. Lark set snares, picked berries without touching the poisonous red ones, and fished the streams with a stubborn patience. When she caught her first rainbow trout, she let out a wild whoop. She cleaned it herself, seasoned it with salt, and served it on tin plates. Caleb took a bite, eyes widening. "Best fish I've ever eaten." She laughed, bright and quick, the sound bouncing off the cabin walls. For a moment, the place felt less like exile, more like home. But Caleb also taught harder truths. How to hold a knife to cut deep if someone grabbed her. How to use her size as advantage. He gave her a small, bone-handled knife, and later, a worn .22 rifle. "Breathe out. Squeeze. Don't jerk," he coached, standing behind her as she aimed at a bark target. The crack echoed, the shot wide, but she didn't flinch. By midsummer, she was hitting clean. Once she even brought down a rabbit. Tears welled in her eyes as she held the limp body. "It's all right to feel sorry," Caleb told her gently. "Shows your heart's still good. But we take only what we need. Waste nothing." The truest test came in early autumn. Caleb was checking trap lines when a gunshot cracked through the trees. He sprinted back, heart hammering. On the cabin porch, Lark stood with the rifle, smoke drifting from the barrel. At the tree line, a black bear retreated into shadows, growling as it went. "It was after the root cellar," she said, voice trembling but steady. "I remembered what you told me. Shoot over its head first." Relief buckled Caleb's knees. "You did good. Real good." That night, as they sat by the fire, she admitted, "I was scared. You'd be a fool not to be, but you kept your head. That's what matters." Somewhere between lessons on survival and laughter over charred bread, the distance between them shrank. Lark was no longer the woman shoved forward like property. Caleb was no longer just the loner who bought her freedom. They had become partners, against the mountain, against the past, against whatever else might come. And though neither dared say it yet, the fire that kept them warm at night was no longer only the one in the hearth. Rumors travel faster than any horse across the high country. By the time autumn painted the aspens gold, Drywell was whispering. They said Caleb Rowan had bought himself a bride on the cheap, hauled her up into the mountains, kept her locked away like property. Some claimed worse. Caleb and Lark knew little of it at first. They rose with the sun, mended fences, split wood, smoked venison strips for winter. Nights were filled with firelight, quiet talk, sometimes laughter. But truth never stays hidden where lies feed hungry mouths. One brittle morning, the sound of hooves broke the stillness. Caleb stiffened, hand drifting toward the rifle propped by the door. Outside, 3 riders appeared, Sheriff Whitlow and 2 deputies, badges gleaming dull in the weak light. Their horses snorted steam in the cold air. Lark's face blanched. She instinctively reached for the knife Caleb had given her. "Easy," he said, laying a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Stay behind me." The sheriff dismounted, voice calm but carrying authority. "Caleb Rowan, folks in town are asking questions. Stories about a girl taken against her will. We need you both to come down and answer them." "She wasn't taken," Caleb said flatly. "She was sold, in front of half the saloon." Whitlow's expression was grim. "That may be, but the law still has to hear her say it. You know how this works." Lark stepped forward then, voice clear though her hands trembled. "I'm not his prisoner. I stayed because I chose to." Whitlow nodded, tipping his hat. "Then let the judge hear it. That's the only way it sticks." Caleb's jaw clenched. He hated the thought of dragging her back into the gossiping mouths of Drywell. But he saw the steel in Lark's eyes. She wasn't afraid to speak now. She was ready. The courthouse in Drywell smelled of dust, ink, and sweat. Word had spread. Every bench was filled with townsfolk eager for scandal. Harlan Pike sat near the front, new boots shining, smug grin plastered across his face as though he were the wronged party. Caleb walked in beside Lark. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. They saw the change in her. No longer the hollow-eyed girl shoved forward in a saloon, but a woman with straight shoulders, neat dress, eyes steady. She walked beside Caleb, not behind him. The judge banged his gavel. "Order. We'll hear this matter." Harlan's lawyer rose first, painting his client as a desperate man forced by poverty. "Better she be fed under another roof than starve under his. A poor man makes poor choices," he intoned. Harlan even tried tears, dabbing at his eyes. "I only wanted her to have a chance." Lark's fists clenched at her sides. Then the judge called her forward. The room hushed. She stepped to the stand, chin trembling but lifted. Her voice came soft, but it carried to every corner. "My father didn't give me away out of kindness. He sold me like a mule. Like a chair. He shoved me forward. I didn't want to go. Mr. Rowan paid only because no one else would stop him." A ripple ran through the room, sharp as a lightning strike. Harlan shifted in his seat, color blotching his face. The lawyer pressed. "And do you wish to return to your father's care?" Lark's eyes searched the crowd until they found Caleb's. His face was stone, but his eyes burned steady on hers. She drew breath, and her voice grew stronger. "No, I choose to stay with Caleb Rowan. He feeds me. He teaches me. He keeps me safe. He cries when I ask if he'll sell me too. That's how I know he won't." Gasps broke across the benches. Even Sheriff Whitlow lowered his head, lips pressed tight. The judge raised his gavel. "Enough. This court will not return a woman to a man who would barter her like stock. Caleb Rowan, you are granted guardianship and partnership with Lark Pike by her own choosing. May God guide you both." The gavel cracked wood. It was done. For a heartbeat, Lark's eyes brimmed, and Caleb's chest swelled with something deeper than relief, something like hope. He stepped to her side as she descended the stand. She slipped her hand into his, small but steady, and the murmurs of the crowd shifted. They saw not scandal, but something stronger, something honest. That evening they rode back toward the mountains, Drywell's gossip trailing useless behind them. The mule clopped along, the sky bruised purple with twilight. At the edge of town, Caleb carved a small wooden token from a scrap of cedar and hung it on the mule's bridle. 2 hands clasped, rough but strong. Lark touched it gently. What does it mean? Caleb looked at her, voice quiet. It means you're never alone again. Her lips curved, soft and certain. They turned their backs to the town and let the mountain road swallow them once more, side by side. The road home felt lighter than the ride down. Drywell faded into dust behind them, its gossip left to rot in the mouths that spawned it. Ahead stretched the long climb, winding through aspens where the wind hummed like a hymn. Caleb and Lark rode side by side, Juniper carrying their weight as if she knew the importance of this return. Neither spoke much. Words seemed too small, but every glance, every brush of hands on the reins, carried more than talk could hold. By the time the cabin came into sight, squat, familiar, smoke curling from its patched chimney, it looked less like a shack and more like sanctuary. Caleb dismounted first, helping Lark down. Her feet touched the earth soft, deliberate, as if she was stepping not onto dirt, but into a new life. She paused, eyes scanning the trees, the stream, the rough cabin walls. Then she smiled. Not the guarded smile she'd worn before, but one that reached her eyes. "This place," she said quietly. "It already feels more like home than anywhere I've known." Caleb felt a knot in his throat. He busied himself unloading supplies from Juniper, but his hands trembled. "Home's whatever you make of it," he muttered. That evening, they ate bread and venison, the fire crackling between them. Lark unwrapped her bundle for the first time. Inside lay the yellowed letter and her mother's silver ring. She slipped the ring onto her finger, its shine faint but resolute. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly. "Regret what?" "Paying for me." He looked across the fire, eyes steady. "Every coin was worth it. Not because I bought you. Because it gave me back something I thought I'd buried. Reason to fight. Reason to feel." The flames painted her face gold, and for the first time, she didn't look away from his gaze. Winter returned sooner than expected, storm clouds heavy with ice. Caleb and Lark faced it together. They cut wood until their hands blistered, stacked it high against the cabin wall. They smoked meat, patched leaks, stuffed cracks with moss. One night, when the storm howled fiercest, they sat wrapped in blankets, shoulder to shoulder, watching sparks fly up the chimney. The cabin shuddered, but inside, warmth grew stronger than the cold outside. Lark leaned her head against his arm. "I used to pray for someone to see me. Not what I could do, not what I was worth, but me. Just me." Caleb turned, his rough hand cupping her cheek. "I see you, Lark." His voice cracked with the weight of truth. She kissed him then, soft at first, then with the certainty of someone who had finally chosen. For Caleb, it was like the thaw after the longest winter. Pain giving way to hope, silence breaking into song. Seasons rolled. Spring melted snow into wildflowers. Summer brought fish from the streams, laughter spilling from the cabin windows. Autumn painted the mesa red and gold, their harvest drying on racks. They lived not as master and kept, but as equals, partners in survival, partners in life. Caleb carved wood in the evenings, spoons, handles, once even a small horse figurine for Lark. But the piece that mattered most was the one he hung above the cabin door, a carving of 2 hands clasped, rough but strong. When Lark saw it, she reached up, fingers brushing the grooves. "What does it mean?" she asked. It means you're never alone again. Her throat tightened, and she turned into his arms. The mountains bore witness as their promise took root, but life in the wild was never free of trial. Coyotes raided their traps. Fever struck Caleb one harsh winter, leaving Lark to tend fire, hunt, and sit by his side through nights of delirium. She fed him broth, pressed cool cloths to his brow, whispered stories until his breathing steadied. When he woke, weak but alive, her eyes shone fierce. "You saved me," he croaked. She shook her head. "No, Caleb. We saved each other." Years later, storms still howled over the peaks. Wolves prowled, droughts came, sickness visited. But no matter what battered their door, they faced it together. Caleb found his strength not in solitude, but in the woman who had walked out of a saloon with him that fateful night. And Lark, once sold like a possession, found herself free in the truest way, free to choose, to fight, to love. On quiet nights, when snow blanketed the mesa and firelight flickered on their faces, she would sometimes whisper the question that had once defined her life. "Are you going to sell me too?" And every time, Caleb would answer, not with words, but with the way he pulled her close, the way he kept the fire burning, the way he carved another line into the clasped hands above their door. Together, they built a life as fierce and unbreakable as the mountains themselves.